Welcome to my podcast, Magic Brain Geeks. It's a new English episode. I'm welcome Dr. Emilia Roig. And we will discuss today, of course, the whole situation we are currently in, the incredible situation that is worldwide, the situation. And the question is interesting for me, how we can create solutions for all of that. How can we get together all these different kind of brains of human beings all over the world? We are all, of course, affected by this virus, and perhaps we can find or create changes for the future during this crisis, and create a better future for all human beings in the world. And therefore, Dr. Emilia Roig is an expert in intersectionality, and I would like to say she holds a PhD in political science from the Humboldt University of Berlin and science po Lyon, and obtained her Master of Public Policy from the Hertie School of Governance and her Master of Business Administration from Jean Moulin University in Lyon. And she worked on human rights issues at Amnesty International and at the International Labour Organization in Tanzania and Uganda, and at the German Agency for International Cooperation in Cambodia. So it's a whole experience. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much that you have time for us, Emilia. And of course, you are the founder and executive director of the Center for Intersectional Justice. And therefore, my question, why did you found this center, and what are the main tasks, or what are your motivation? What are you doing in the center?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in the podcast. These are indeed very unusual times, but that are also holding a lot of opportunities and chances for us in the future. So I'm happy that we're going to talk about that topic later on. Mm-hmm. So I founded the center in 2017 because I wasn't fulfilled professionally and also, I would say, politically by my previous jobs. And I always could find really big gaps in the several institutions that I was working at. And that's why that at some point I decided not to be frustrated anymore with my job and to create a structure where I could put in place my vision and achieve goals that, you know, I would set for myself and for others, and collectively as well with a community of people working on the same issues. I would say that it started a little bit by chance, although I wouldn't say that there's anything that happens by chance anytime, but it's more that I got frustrated with my job at the time, and then many people told me, oh, why don't you found a center? Why don't you, I mean, it wasn't a center at the time, but why don't you found your own thing? Why don't you do your own thing? Maybe you could, you know, create an organization. And at first I was thinking, oh no, this is too tiresome right now. I can't even think about it. And then little by little, the seed was planted in my head, and it started to make sense for me. And I realized, okay, maybe I can do that actually. It's not that complicated, and it's also not that, it's not as challenging as I think it is. And then I met with Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality. She's a law professor at UCLA and at Columbia University, and I had done my PhD with her partly. Had done a research fellowship at Columbia University. And we met in Paris again by chance, although of course there's no coincidence. Mm-hmm. And then I told her about the project, and I said, okay, I have this idea that I'd like to develop, but I'm not really sure what it's going to be, you know, what the name is going to be, what we're even going to do, but it's just an idea at the time. And I was wondering if once it's more developed, if you'd be willing to support it. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a big leap for me to ask her at that stage, because I saw that I couldn't wait until I had a completely finished and well-developed idea to ask her, because I didn't know when I was going to see her next. And then I was really surprised, very positively surprised, because she said, of course, Emilia, yes, I'm happy to see you create. So I'm definitely going to support it. Mm-hmm. And I was very relieved, and I was at the same time very scared, because I thought, okay, now I actually have to do it. It's kind of
go way back.
Put a little bit of pressure. But that's and the initial idea, or the vision that I have with the center is to to open our societies to the idea that the current discrimination and inequalities that we face, that some of us face more than others, of course, are the result of rigid, very powerful systems of oppression that are century old, and that we would all benefit from their dismantlement. That it's not a win or lose situation, because many times we represent discrimination as an opinion, as actions that are performed by specific people, and that if these people are tackled and if we manage to change their views, then we will have solved discrimination. And what intersectionality tells us, and generally analysis, critical race theory or postcolonial theory or feminist theory, queer theory tell us, is that inequalities and discrimination happen because of a certain view of the world that has been imposed onto us ever since we were born, and that hierarchies between people and places some of us higher on the hierarchy and lower, and others lower on the hierarchy, according to identity traits, and those identity traits are ascribed to us or assigned to us when we were born and also later on in life. And it kind of prevents us all, even the people who currently benefit from those systems, it prevents us all from being whole human beings. And this is a view that may seem a little bit abstract and at a very meta level, but that's really essentially what the vision that I have is to live in a world where we can see those systems and that we can overcome them collectively.
Or are there special methods or possibilities to form this development? Do you
Yes, of course. I mean, to confront those systems, the first step is to be able to see them with humility. And that's a massive step, because if you start saying, okay, this is racist, or if you start to point out racism to white people, for example, many people will start feeling shame and guilt, and then it will translate into defensiveness, and then people will be defensive, and it will be impossible to overcome the situation and see it as it is, because the ego comes in the way. And it's a possible thing, and it's the same with every other thing. It's the same with pointing out sexism to men, or pointing out homophobia to straight people, and and so on and so forth. And in order for it to work, and in order for us to see the systems as they are, is to kind of decenter our egos from the situation and understand that what's taking place is a system that has shaped us, but it's not our fault. But, and there's a but, it may not be our fault that we see the world this way, but we have a responsibility to change it. So we have a responsibility, and we are accountable to our actions. And people who deny the existence of sexism or racism or any other, or patriarchy or any other system of oppression, contribute to perpetuate the systems in place, and continue to perpetuate the power imbalances, the privileges, the discrimination and the exclusions attached to them.
Okay. And you said every person can be aware of that and can fight on the personal level, and that's one step. And the another step could be to develop something on the system level to create,
of course, yes,
some legal framework and.
Absolutely. So there are several levels, and only a holistic approach can solve, or can, in the long term, challenge and dismantle those systems. And one of them, of course, so we have different levels. The individual level, the individual cognitive / spiritual level is the level of the self. So what we can do, each and every one of us, at an individual level. Nobody can do that for us. We can, of course, be inspired by others, and we can, but the learning needs to come from us. And that's something that is leading to self-realization and opening up a vast array of possibilities, as well as seeing the world. And it's really an enriching process, even if it might be painful for the people who experience the discrimination, of course, but also for the people who benefit from the system and may not be directly affected. And then there's the institutional level. So it means looking at in each society what is driving those hierarchies and the exclusion and discrimination. Mostly it would be laws and policies. But it can also be the media, the way people are represented in the media, the way the news is portraying issues and events, and also remedies to the events, the way some people are invisibilized and not seen. And so on those levels, so there's the media level, the institutional level, but also the wider systemic level that encompasses everything. The way we raise our children collectively and individually in families, so if we continue to raise our children in a way that that places everything that is feminine as inferior, then we will contribute to perpetuating patriarchy as a system. And many people will tell me that, you don't see that happening in countries like Germany or France. I mean, the two countries that I know best. And I would say that definitely we continue to see it simply because we continue to have a deep discomfort with little boys who express their feminine personalities. Mm-hmm. A little boy who's wearing a skirt, nail polish and long hair continues to trigger negative emotions and negative feelings in adults and other, mostly in adults. And then, of course, it's transferred to kids, and then we kind of teach that it's fine for little girls to have manly attributes or masculine attributes and to play with toys, boys' toys, and wear short hair. That's it's more accepted, but the other way around is not. And that's the root of sexism and, for example, street harassment or, harassment on the street or harassment in the public sphere, harassment at work, with men in positions of power, such as doctors and bosses and journalists. But as well, it's the source of homophobia and of transphobia and of domestic violence as well. So it's really trying to look at the root of the issue and working on it to the core.
Oh, I see. Yes. And do you have special projects in your center?
Yes, of course. So,
can you give some examples for?
Yes, yeah. Our work is centered around 3 pillars. So the first one is advocacy. Mm-hmm. The second one is research, and the third one is training. So on the first advocacy branch, basically what we do is infusing a paradigmatic shift in policy and lawmaking in Europe in the field of anti-discrimination. Mm-hmm. So we work with the European Commission, the European Parliament, national parliaments as well, and other institutions, political institutions, to change laws and policies that need to be changed or pushing for change where they need to happen. Mm-hmm. An example is, the Berlin so-called neutrality law, which de facto legally discriminates against women wearing the headscarf in Germany. Mm-hmm. So that would be an example, but we have many other examples that would be changing laws and policies of asylum to include more LGBT refugees and migrants, so that they are not discriminated against when applying for asylum, even if they're coming from a safe country, in inverted commas. Mm-hmm. Another thing that we do in advocacy is really like public speaking and trying to spread a perspective, a vision, and a concept in all at all different levels of all institutional levels. Institutions of the private sector, public sector, non-profit sector, civil society as a whole, and in the media. So, for example, what we're doing now would also qualify as advocacy in a sense. It's indirect advocacy, but it definitely contributes to changing the discourse on discrimination. Mm-hmm. Then the second pillar is research, and then we do research that is mostly commissioned by other organizations. So we did research commissions by the Belgian Ministry of Labor to analyze their anti-discrimination and diversity policies from an intersectional point of view. We had a research commissioned by the German Integration and Migration Research Center in order to analyze the gaps in the legal and policy framework in Germany on intersectionality, and the exact same study was done for the European Network Against Racism. We are also publishing a fact sheet, which will come out in the next weeks, on intersectionality in Europe. So the list is long, and so we're doing another one. We have another research commissioned by the Diversity Charter, the German Diversity Charter, and it's about looking at the category socioeconomic background to add it, to include it as well as one of the diversity dimensions, and understanding to what extent it could be captured in diversity policies. And the last pillar of our work is trainings, and we provide trainings on anti-discrimination, anti-discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and of course all of this from an intersectional perspective, to institutions of the private, public, and non-profit sectors all across Europe. And so it includes, for example, Human Rights Watch, or ThoughtWorks, which is a tech company, or Ableton Loop, which is a music producing company, or, you know, the European Commission. So it's really varied, and we have many different clients, and every time we adapt to their needs and look at, we did training at the Canadian Embassy to Germany. And every time we adapt to their specific context and the specific challenges that they're facing. And so far, we've seen that this has yielded quite a lot of impact, because we're tackling smaller structures where policy changes occur faster.
Yeah, genau, to do it from the basic.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Oh, I see. Yes. You must be really motivated to do that, I would say.
Yes.
To create this huge, task and these huge pillars. It's a lot of work, I would say. Where do you personally grow up, and what do you think are your own main steps to create this work now? Your motivation or your own development?
So I would say that my own drive really comes from an idea of justice that is it feels like I don't have a choice, really. You know, I have to do something to counter the gross injustice that we're living in our European countries, and that often goes unnoticed by many people. You know, it's like a lot of us don't see that we are still living in profoundly unjust societies where, you know, you have people who still living in slums in European cities, for example, Roma and Sinti communities who in Paris, live without running water and electricity. We still have migrant people coming, to seek asylum and find peace and protection in European countries, and they end up on the street without any help at all. We see still that transgender people, especially trans women, get killed on the streets, every day, and lack protection, visibility, and also that their lives are not really mourned by anyone. And so apart from, of course, the LGBT community, but also not all of the LGBT community. So, I mean, these are just a few examples, but we see that a lot of Black people continue to, be racially profiled and experience police brutality in our countries. And so all of these types of injustices are not really framed as injustices many times. We continue to frame them with a very high, that people continue to have a responsibility in their plight, that, but if migrants end up on the street, it's probably because they didn't work hard enough. Or, if a trans woman is being murdered, that's probably because she was, a sex worker. Or, if Black people are searched and experience police violence, that's also because they're criminals. And that's why we need to move beyond this frame and understand that injustices always have roots in history as well, and understanding that, for example, Roma people who live in makeshift houses, it's not because they're lazy. On the contrary, they work really hard, and they are much more resilient than many of us, would be in such a situation. But we see that after the Holocaust, the Porarmos is the name actually for the Roma and Sinti Holocaust of the Second World War, that they didn't experience any restitutions, that, there was no genocide recognized against the Roma and Sinti, and that the ground on which they were murdered in the Nazi regime was that because they were considered genetically criminals. And so, and then because of this, they couldn't receive any reparations like other victims of the Holocaust did. For example, the Jewish community did. And also they had to wait until 2012 to have an official memorial in Berlin, and then in such a situation, and also after the Holocaust, after the Podamos, they remained stateless for many of them. And so if we look at the historical developments and roots of implications basically of current situation, then we can understand that it's much more than individual will and motivation and aspirations.
Yes. And your experience, you grew up in France, was that you saw this in Paris or wherever, and you need to do something against?
Yeah, well, I think it came from, I was very sensitive to injustices, and I saw it, for example, when we were walking on the streets of Paris and I would see homeless people, I would be very, very deeply moved as a child. And I also, we were watching documentary films, and then I would see that not every child has, toys and can go to school. And I felt that it was very unfair for that matter. And if I compared my life with the life of my mother, who grew up in Martinique and experienced poverty in her young years, and then later on as well after they migrated to France, I felt that it was not, I wondered what is entitling me to such a good childhood in comparison to her. And also why did she have to experience so much racism in comparison to me? So of course I do experience racism, but the ways in which racism impacted her personally and also in her later life professionally are it's really at another level. And so I think this is what, in the core of my family, when I saw this, prompted my activism and my engagement, I would say, my commitment to justice.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, yes, of course. It's a lot of energy.
And also, plus I'm an Aries, and I'm passionate about astrology, so I had to bring it up at some point. But
okay.
My astrological sign is Aries, and it makes sense. Aries people like to create and to found organizations disproportionately if you look at other signs.
Wow. Okay. Then you are fulfilling the right, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. But let's talk about the current situation, about the Corona situation, or these, distancing, social distancing on the one hand, and the digital development, education, and all these, upcoming things. What do you think is chance in all of that? Is it more like equal, that AI is more equal than perhaps a normal offline life, or is there a chance to get more equality, more diversity, more inclusion situations through all of this?
So I would definitely not say that AI is less discriminatory or more equal than real life, because AI is a replication of humans. And sometimes it can also take the worst in humans. And so we've seen situations where robots basically learned from the internet and became extremely racist and were Holocaust denials and saying, okay, we need Hitler back in power. So this is how far as it can get. It doesn't have to go as far, but AI as such is what we make out of it. And as long as we have not confronted our discrimination, racism, sexism, and all the factors that create exclusion in our societies, AI will do it too. And that's why it's also quite dangerous in a sense, because AI develops much faster than us. And so we may have, all of us have implicit biases. All of us have prejudices against other people based on race, gender, class, and other sexual orientation, disability, etc. But we have those, we have the possibility as well with affect and emotional, our emotional life basically to also counter some of those implicit biases. But I think that AI, it's much more difficult to come to that. So that's why we would need to include in the development of AI to be more diverse and also be aware and very cognizant of the fact that those implicit biases are being replicated in AI, and that by being replicated, it can contribute to, gross discrimination, exclusions leading up to death. And that's quite important to mention that it's dangerous. It's not just that some people, get less access than others. It's really like a matter of life and death sometimes.
Yes.
And now if we look at the current situation, yes, of course we have, it's coming at a time where, luckily we have online devices that are developing at an exponential rate right now as well in their functionalities and the way they, what they enable us to do. Yesterday I was giving a class at university online with roughly 30 students, and I was kind of dreading that class because it lasted 4 hours and I was thinking that it was going to be unbearable, but it worked fine. It was really nice, actually. We could, lead the class like we would have done in a real life setting. Yeah. And what it tells us as well is that, maybe we could this crisis holds a lot of hope and a lot of possibilities with it, if we know what to make out of it. And I think the biggest challenge will be to not try to hold on to what we know and to try to recreate the past as we know it. If we do that, we're going right in the wall. What we should do is to take the time, take a step back and try to see what is possible. And this is extremely difficult to do because we're not used to that. Our minds are used to what we know and we hold on to it because we fear everything we don't know. And that's really, that's problematic because this is not how change happens. We're resisting change. Change is scary. Change is not what we want if we're, speaking from a rational place. And so, in terms of accessibility, for example, a lot of people, so I have a colleague of mine who's, in a wheelchair, and she said, okay, for you guys, confinement is really difficult, but you know what? A lot of us have lived like that for our whole lives. We've been confined home because there is not enough accessible spaces for people with disabilities. And so I was thinking, okay, that there's so many things that we could have done in the past and that we can still do to include people with disabilities, no matter what their needs may be, because not every person with disability has the same needs. It also requires a lot of, openness to listen to what the needs are. And also, departing from, our capitalist neoliberal society that requires from us to never stop, to continue working, to be focused on the accumulation of profits that is divided very unequally between the people who actually work and those who reap the profits. It's a system that, of course, benefits some people with material gains and money, but it's a system that is negatively affecting us all because it's rubbing our souls, basically. It's not something where we can just simply be. You see that, I grew up in a capitalist society and also from a migrant household where I've been told that, I need to work all the time. I need to work twice as hard as everybody else. And so this is what I did. And it's impossible for me to just lie on the sofa and be content with myself and just enjoy just being. I feel guilty. I feel like I constantly need to be productive. And this is problematic because, what is life about? It's not always about doing. It's also about being. So I think it could give us an opportunity to be more in the being instead of doing, and in the experiencing more as the producing, and to be more inclusive and to recenter the human. And to recenter life, I would say life and not only the human, because we also need to recenter nature, minerals, animals, natural resources, basically, or nature. I don't even want to say resources because they don't have to be useful, but just nature, in order to recenter nature, the human and living beings. And it requires, it requires a lot of, imagination, and creativity, because we need to recreate something that doesn't look like what we already know. And so people who say, oh, we need to continue working exactly as before, I'm like, yes, we do somehow, but we shouldn't overdo it, because really, essentially what we're being asked to do right now is to take a break And this break can be very productive. You know, when I'm writing a book at the moment, and I took a week's holiday in January, and I was feeling a little bit uneasy. I was like, oh, I could be writing my book right now. And then the doing nothing for a week. I mean, I was on a yoga retreat, so I wasn't doing nothing at all, but still I was doing much less than I'm used to doing. And when I came back, I was very, very productive, simply because this void is necessary. And currently we need void. We need void for nature, we need void for ourselves, and we need void to create something else. Yeah. And if we're in an actionary process where we're trying to save, you know, everything we have, it's not going to be possible. That being said, I think there are a lot of people that there will be a cost to it. I mean, the transformation we're currently living in is going to have a cost. And I like, I think Deepak Chopra's quotes. He says, before any great transformation, there is chaos, and we're right in the middle of it. And it's been going on for a bit already. It's not like, right, okay, Corona is the beginning of another era, I want to say, but nobody knows what it's going to be. Is it the beginning? Is it the end? We don't know. But there will be a cost, as I said, and currently we see that the only thing that helps us survive right now are not, you know, people working in finance or in marketing or in retail. No, people who will help us survive right now are, you know, health personnel. They're, you know, people working at the front lines of you know, doing childcare. And I want to mention, you know, people doing care for the sick that are at home and not visible and also not recognized. A lot of, and it's gendered because it's 90% women doing this job, even in countries like Germany where we say, oh no, we're egalitarian. No, it's not the case. Like I would tell you, you go in any home right now where both parents are doing home office, yeah, you can be sure that the woman is doing much less hours of home office and many more hours of cleaning, taking care of the kids, doing homeschooling, etc. And that's the same for every other European country and also the US, I would say. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we have to see that all the people currently, and the people working in supermarkets, you know, working to fill up our shelves and making sure that we have food on the table, the farmers, you know, working in factories, and all those jobs are minimum wage jobs. They are jobs that are invisible, that are devalued, that have very low status, very low working conditions. And that's the time right now to see them and to give them the visibility they deserve and also the value they deserve. Mm-hmm. And if we give value to those jobs that are currently undervalued, then it means the collapse of capitalism. It means the collapse of capitalism because capitalism rests on the shoulders of people who are doing essential work. So essential work that is not indispensable work, I want to say. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless are being paid very little. And that's that's one of the big incoherences of our time and of our economic system. But with the Corona crisis, it becomes visible. And a lot of people realize, okay, so how come we have that? I mean, nobody's working. All the people, you know, like who are normally represented as professionals, you know, if you see professional people, they work in front of computers. Most of them are not working, or they're working, you know, really reduced hours at home. Mm-hmm. The ones who are continuing to go to work are, you know, people who are working at minimum wage or undocumented workers, etc. And the ones who are paying the price of this crisis are also the ones who, you know, the people from the cultural and artistic fields who are also indispensable fields. Arts and culture are so vital to life. They are so vital to our systems. And nevertheless, they are working in extremely precarious conditions. They have to kind of struggle just to, you know, make art and things that we are enjoying. If you look at what everybody's doing at home right now during the lockdown, we're reading books, we're listening to music, we're watching films, we're, you know, doing things that have to do with culture and beauty and art. And that's why it's important to also value these types of works, these types of work. And we see that currently the states are starting to, put in place emergency plans to